Good afternoon. Let's try that again. Good afternoon. Well, thank you so much for coming out. As you know, this is the first in a series of lectures sponsored by the Nashville Historic Foundation. I'm lucky to be a board member. Jill Deese is in charge of, where's Jill? Where's Jill? Okay, Jill is our fearless leader, and she's here, and there's some other board members here too. Thank you for coming. This is part of a series, and it's focused on celebrating Nashville women. And tonight's event is the first of 3. Next week we're going to have Jim Hoobler, who most of you know has worked for years at the Tennessee State Museum, knows more about the state capitol than anything, and knows about women in art, and that's what he's going to talk about, women in art. That should be really fun. And then the next week we have Sandra Shelton, right here, who I have discovered knows as much about architecture as any architect in the city. She reminds me so much of Christine Craley, who used to write for the scene, you know, and would just know everything that's going on, why, and Sandra is just a wealth of information. So between her in 2 weeks and Jim next week, we're in store for some really, really wonderful lectures. I want to make sure that you share these lectures with other folks, so we have wonderful attendance at the next 2 also. Okay, so tonight, this is the easiest thing in the world. You're asked to introduce somebody named Demetria Kalodimos. Okay. It's unbelievable. I've gotten to know her over the past few years for some unusual reasons. Part involved in the bridge on the Natchez Trace, you know, the issues that they were having, stuff like that. And she and I talked about those projects. And of course, I was so familiar with her being the broadcast, being the network anchor at WSNB. Of course, to actually talk with someone, is that famous. And so, look, a couple things about her. She was born in Morton Grove, Illinois. She got her degree at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and she started her career in Champaign, Illinois, and then she joined WSNB in 1984. At 33 years, she was the longest continually serving evening news anchor ever at WSNB. And as most of you know, most recently, in 2022, she has started the Nashville Banner, which is online, and I hope you look at it, because I try to look at it every day. And there's an article about the Metro Legal Director, Wally Dietz, I guess is that Dietz? And also, a few years ago, Bob Woodward came and spoke in Nashville, the guy, All the President's Men. And she interviewed Bob Woodward, and I think she almost eclipsed him during the evening because her questions were so interesting. And then when people got up and commented, several of them commented about Demetria as much as they did for Bob Woodward. She's won like 2 National Headliners Awards and 11 Emmy Awards. I consider her the most respected journalist I've ever known. Please welcome Demetria Kalodimos.
Now you are entirely too kind. And he was sweet enough to spend some time with my niece, who is in graduate school at the University of Texas, Austin, now in architecture. Straight A's, I might add. Yeah, doing really well. Well, when they mentioned, let's talk about the history of women in Nashville television. We're 76 years into television in this town now. Channel 4 was signed on in 1950, long before me. But back in 1990, I did a documentary, an hour-long documentary on the first 40 years of the station. So now, fast forward, it's 75 years. But these facts have not changed. So I thought, why reinvent the wheel? I'm going to at least show you the first, the birth of television section from that documentary and then talk a little bit about the women. So I do television. That's why I thought I'm just going to hook up my laptop and we'll watch a little bit and then we'll have a conversation afterwards. I don't claim to know everything about all the women, and I'm sure I've missed a bunch of them, but I've got 2 little video pieces. This first part that kind of sets up how TV got into this marketplace, and the second one that will probably make you smile a little bit, some familiar faces and some blasts from the past. So let's hope the tech works. George and I checked it out the other day, and we had it working great, so.
Hey, don't cackle. I'll lay meetings here tonight.
When did the picture open? Well, it opens around the first of the year, Steve. I certainly hope you can make it. Yeah, well, I hope I live to see it. And he says, say, do you know how to get to Griffith Park? And I said, gee, I'm terribly sorry I don't. And the guy says, we go 3 blocks straight ahead, turn left.
What made you say I was 39? Well, I've got your quarter. Let's both be happy.
The gender function is somewhat like this.
One, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, we're gonna rock. Around 2 o'clock tonight.
There had never been a time quite like it, when cars grew fins, guys grew ducktails, and the baby boom just grew and grew. It was the era of Bobby Socks, Grill Cream, Bandstand, and Elvis, the blush of innocence, the promise of industry, history set not in stone, but chrome. The 50s would imprint America as no other decade before. But in this city in 1950, even big screen 3D was no competition for small screen TV, and the birth of Channel 4, a Nashville institution.
I guess the sun was 50. This started to break, and we began to hear things about WSM. We prepared ourselves.
Robert Burgess was 21, newly drafted, waiting for a call to Korea, and waiting to see a picture on the family's new television set.
All we could get was a test pattern, but we watched the test pattern.
Watching the test pattern every night, we watched the test. I guess maybe we thought that somebody was going to push a switch somewhere and we were going to see something.
Dolores Harris had just graduated from North Nashville High School. Her dad bought one of the first sets in the neighborhood.
But it was mostly cabinet. I can tell you that. I can remember that. It was just this little black thing with the 14-inch in the middle. And of course, it was more cabinet than anything else with the rabbit ears sitting up on the top of it, you know.
And they sold for like $500, $600, $700, $800. And I'm sure there was a very select group of people that at the beginning bought TV.
Robert Eskin should know. He was the first wholesale distributor of TVs in Nashville. He took a chance on a product many considered a passing fad.
I think at some point they knew it was going to work. I think why they were dubious was, is it going to work here? Is it going to work in my house? Am I going to spend $700, $800 and get a lot of snow on a piece of glass?
A good question. The same question being asked by top management at WSM.
And I remember most D.W. Craig, who was the father of WSM radio and television, coming back from New York and telling us all around the studio that he didn't really see too much for the future in that television thing. A real jerky, squeaky little picture on an 8-inch tube.
This picture was recorded and synchronized with sound in the General Electric Company's House of Magic at Schenectady, New York.
TV wasn't the invention of any one man, and it was hardly an overnight sensation. Earliest experimentation with the concept dates back to the late 1800s. But it wasn't until the 1920s that the technology to make TV possible had really arrived. A Russian immigrant named Vladimir Zworykin perfected the first all-electronic system, but he had a tough time selling his boss on the costly research.
Later on, I found out that what he said was, put his guy to work on something more useful.
In 1939, television took center stage at the World's Fair in New York.
Oh, is it going?
It's done.
Hiya, folks. This is Clark Cable Middleton speaking. As you can see, you've got your television sets turned on.
World War II put mass production on hold. But by 1945, television began to dominate domestic life. Within the next 5 years, the number of sets nationwide increased from 10,000 to 12 million. When WSM-TV signed on the air in 1950, there were 98 television stations in America.
Louisville was on the air, as I said, and so was Atlanta and so on. And the problem there was, can you make money out of television? This was the real problem.
And Jack DeWitt really didn't have the answer. An engineering genius, DeWitt worked his college summers helping to install broadcast systems at WSM Radio. That was the mid-20s. By 1946, he was president of WSM Incorporated, in charge of TV, faced with a huge technical problem and just 6 months to fix it.
The problem there was that the phone company would not bring in the programs for us because we were only one station in Nashville. They would have to put in a microwave relay system or coaxial cable to bring in the programs from the closest point, which is Louisville.
So DeWitt and his crew figured out a complicated system of hopscotching the broadcast signal 170 miles through a series of towers in the Kentucky countryside to the living rooms of Nashville.
You won't believe what I'm going to tell you. The total cost of the TV station and the microwave system was $600,000. That's what it was.
When they came on air, the first thing I remember was Mr. Otis Devine, who gave some sort of presentation at the beginning.
Good afternoon. This is Channel 4, WSM-TV in Nashville, Tennessee, signing on the air.
Oh, that harvest has it one exactly as it ought to be.
Mr. Harvey, Fred Harvey, about 15 minutes, he wanted to be the first commercial TV sponsor in Nashville, so he bought the first program and had Dottie Dillard and Owen Bradley as accompaniment.
I knew a song called Cotton Candy and a Toy Balloon. So I made some cotton candy out of cotton, and I got a toy balloon on a stick, and I sang the chorus. Cotton candy and a toy balloon on a sunny Sunday afternoon. And then the band played the instrumental, and while the band was playing an instrumental, a fly came and landed on my nose. We're both busy, and I couldn't think of how I was going to get the fly off my nose, so I just went like this. And then the next day said, everybody in Nashville got up to shoot a fly off of the screen.
The feature presentation was yet to come. From the gridiron, Notre Dame versus North Carolina.
Notre Dame came back fighting in the second half. Bill Barrett out down the sidelines to produce.
The picture broke up in the middle of the game, but Robert Burgess remembers something more important.
And it was during this time that my grandfather was just sitting to my left, and I happened to glance at him, and he was crying. And I thought, why is he crying? He said, what is it that affected him so? We were just watching a football game. And it was later that day or that evening when I looked back, I realized that here was a man who was 70 years old and seen a lot of history. And this made some sort of an impact on him. Literally, we were eyewitnesses to History City watching that come into this community.
That was the kick-off of a whole new life for everybody, really. I mean, it absolutely changed everybody's life.
early viewers were treated to a lot of westerns, and yes, pro wrestling was around even then. But it was the local program that sealed the station's popularity. You're looking at the earliest moving pictures in the history of WSM-TV. Home movies shot behind the scenes in 1951 by the station's first cameraman, Sid O'Berry.
And in these scenes, Jim Sanders, who played Rough and Ready, who hosted the cowboy western movie every day. And on the left, we have Red Foley, bless his heart. The station always took advantage of personalities visiting the town, like Tex Ritter, here pictured with Minnie Pearl. This is David Cobb and Ed Sullivan. And you will notice coming up, this is Jimmy Wakely singing with the fantastic Anita Kerr, the lady with perfect musical pitch. Lovely Kathy Copas and her famous father, Cowboy Copas. Oh, Dave Overton, our sports announcer and comic relief. I love June Carter. And did you notice Mother Maybelle up there, her sister? And the guitarist on the right is the fantastic Chet Atkins.
But if you ask the studio crew, their all-time favorites were the cooking shows, complete with gourmet leftovers. The best-known queen of cuisine was Phyla Rawlings Hott, host of Kitchen College.
First time I'd ever used a mixer on television. And the spatula caught in it, and all the egg white came coming out and got all over my face. And I was on television.
Phyla introduced some of the first ethnic food to those watching at home. She was one of the pioneer flight attendants and had traveled all over the world. When she wasn't in the air, she was on the air.
TV was a friend. TV was a friend to the lonely. It was a playmate for the child. It was a companion for the homemaker who stayed at home. Most of all, TV was a friend.
I rock and roll and I skip with a spine. You bang me stone, you bang me style.
Come on in, the folk dance party's underway here in the studios of WSM-TV.
The 50s were kind of an innocent, sweet time and great music and good times. Jerry Christman, that was the guy with the...
Oh, look here, there we are, right there.
Front and center, in the crew cut and tight sweater,
Who are those people?
Hey, I was skinny.
You were skinny.
it was 1956, and those people were Ron Scott and Marianne Booker Leach, dedicated dance partners, sometimes sweethearts, and guests on WSM's Coke Dance Party and 5 O'Clock Hot. Channel 4's answer to Bandstand, it was on the air even before Dick Clark.
Ruth Early and Doug Conley.
Oh, that's Ruth and Doug.
The Hop gave local teens a daily dose of the spotlight. In fact, the show became so popular, the kids traveled as a troupe all over the state and competed for all those great prizes back in the studio.
So our gal will be well equipped with a lovely piece of luggage from the Nashville Trunk and Bag Company.
Thank you very much. Now, everybody to the dance floor. Dance for the prize and for the fun. Cecil picks out the winner. Okay, here we go.
You had to sing that. You had it on time. Look at him. And I would sing the song.
The TV was a big deal then, really. It's amazing to think that all of that started, when we were kids. And now in our children's generation, on mine, it's just taken for granted, and TV games, video games, and all that goes with that technology. It's incredible to believe in one lifetime that's happened.
Before the 50s were over, WSM would experience its worst tragedy. A new $100,000 broadcast tower, 1,200 feet high, was nearly complete, when it collapsed in 1957, killing 4 men.
The man in charge of the erection of the tower was really not competent, it turned out, to do it. He had 4 men on the tower, tightening bolts and working on it, and was at the same time adjusting the guy wires on the tower. And the tower collapsed because of the adjustment of the guy wires. He just pulled the tower down, is what he did, and killed those 4 men.
To DeWitt, those 4 lives were the greatest loss the station would ever experience. After all, WSM was owned and operated by National Life, an insurance company, the very symbol of safety and protection. So the 60s began with a promise to keep future towers a safe distance from homes and schools, and with the realization that WSM had made the right decision. This box of wires and tubes was truly man's most powerful creation.
We were in it, we'd gotten in it knowingly, and our idea was to succeed. That was it. And we did. We did it.
I'm going to let it run through the 60s.
Ricky, wait a minute. Let's not watch television tonight.
Not watch television!
Is reasonably familiar to the public, is that correct?
Well, dear, I just don't know.
What time is it? Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. The Beatles! One blow, and we can take that hand and split apart. No, you can't. Yeah, split them right now.
It's on you.
Well, let's see. First off,
Are you through flapping your trap because of the hour, or is it something to tell you?
The wildest imaginations couldn't have hatched the real-life happenings of the 60s. Change, fast and furious. There was fashion, the long and short of it, and Beatlemania spread like the measles. We marched for civil rights and against war. We came together in grief and glory. Television made sure we didn't miss a moment in living color or instant replay. The training wheels were off this new technology. WSM TV was 10 years old.
No one really said, I want to be a newscaster. I want to be an anchorman, or I want to be a cameraman, or I want to be a news producer. We don't know what those people were.
By 1960, everyone in Nashville knew who Judd Collins was. He'd been on the air 10 years. As far as they were concerned, he was Mr. Television, Mr. Truth, Mr. Trust.
It was primitive compared to what's state of the art today. We went on the air with a 15-minute newscast, as I remember. 10 o'clock at night. There was no 6 o'clock news. The 15 minutes included news, weather, and sports.
There are some 2,000 reasons why scores of Middle Tennesseans are keeping an anxious eye on the Gulf Coast tonight.
Our first newscast was called Views of the News. For some reason or other, we progressed into local sponsorship by ESSO. Men from McCann Erickson Advertising came in here to select the ESO reporter. And a group of us auditioned, sat down and read news for it. So he selected me as the SO reporter, and they had to have an alternate, so they selected Ralph Christian. The designation was SOA and SOB.
So for the next 5 or 10 years, when I walked on the set, everyone said, well, here comes the SOB.
Though he's been off the air nearly 20 years, Ralph Christian is still identified with Channel 4 and with Judd. Together, they christened a new baby, the television newscast.
When we did newscasts, we did it all. You had the sound on film, and but you had very few live remotes in those days.
No, we had no idea. The full involved when we arrived on the scene. And
we were determined to bring to Nashville the best that we could.
Often that involved a quick trip to the airport.
Something happened in New York or Washington before noon. It was photographed by Movie Tone News in those days. And the film was processed and put on an American Airlines plane that went from New York to Washington to Nashville. One of my duties was at about 8:30 every night was to go to the old Nashville airport, wait for an American Airlines plane to stop rolling, and as the door went down and opened up, a very accommodating stewardess would throw a box out the door. And if I was lucky, I caught it because we were in a tremendous press for time.
But in March of 1960, a huge news story was unfolding right across town with no time to spare.
And the prisoners have literally just came. They have ignited their mattresses and their blankets.
2 convicts were holding 18 hostages at the main prison.
After I got there, seeing the magnitude of what was happening and the fact that it wasn't going to be quickly resolved, found that the engineers were already keyed in, and they were making plans to do a live remote from there.
In time, Judd Collins would convince the governor to allow television cameras inside the prison. WSM would stay on the air all night and most of the next day.
This is the first time, ladies and gentlemen, in the history of the penal system of this country, that live television cameras have been allowed inside the prison so that you might sit in on a situation such as the one that we have here today.
I did not talk all of that time. I think I did most of that by myself. Ralph was there. Most of that probably was a combination of Ralph and me, and there was a lot of silence. I remember Ernie Moore told me by telephone, he said, I know you're talked out, you've been talking about that for 4, 5, 6 hours. He says, why don't you see if the camera can tell the story? So I took about an hour hiatus and went to the mess hall and came back, and they were just panning the prison, panning the location, and that told the story.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're now looking for the moment we've been waiting for since 3:30 yesterday afternoon.
We did not realize at that time what a history-making thing that would be in Nashville television, but I think it was.
Be back to visit with you later on, but right now, let's head for Purina Grand Ole Opry.
By the 60s, the station that was building a news reputation already had one in entertainment. The Purina Grand Ole Opry, broadcast nationwide, originated from the studios of WSM. The Nashville sound went national. Then, in June of 1963, a popular nighttime DJ took a try at morning television.
There was no programming prior to the Today Show. They needed a lead-in for the Today Show. What they did, they took, I don't know, 20 or 30 Opry stars, and they got a special rate from the Musicians Union, and they cut 10 songs apiece with each one, and then built us a library. It was nothing fancy, just stand up and sing.
Just the country way down in the big back where I was born.
The videos weren't too classy, but they worked. That went on for over a year until I felt like we had just about seen these videos all I could stand, and I wondered if the audience could stand to see them anymore. And so I went to work on Irving Law to get a band, and I was sneaking band in.
all this, plus the latest news and weather.
Soon, the band was hired and the show renamed.
I'm the star of the show, yes. Don't you forget it. All of you. Good morning and welcome to our show.
But despite its title, The Ralph Emery Show has always been a team effort, complete with cheerleaders.
Maud and Dorothy Paul, and they are the Paul sisters, P-A-U-L, do not work with Channel 4 despite rumors. But they are the most loyal fans in the world. They've been coming to this television station on a regular basis since 1965. And as to why, I don't know, unless they decided they wanted to be close to somebody. Then we made them stars, and that gave them reasons, because we put, we've had Maud and Dorothy on singing and doing all sorts of things.
Well, when I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a girl. Don't ever play with guns, but I shot a man in Reno.
Other local and national stars would shine in that early morning hour. Bob Olson enjoyed a 14-year career at Channel 4, first as a weatherman and later the action news reporter.
Letters, there's not a thing in the world for us to be concerned about today. I'll just show you.
Charlie, don't let me interrupt you. Charlie,
you're interrupting me.
How would you get?
I was sort of the second banana for Ralph, first of the people who did the news and the weather on that program, and when Ralph wasn't there, I filled in as well. It was a different kind of show in the beginning. First of all, the artists, it was not staffed with staff performers, the singers that you have on there now, but rather we would, on every show, there would be an artist of some renown. One of Ralph's closest friends was Marty Robbins, and Marty would come by at least 4 or 5 times a year. Roger Miller was by all the time in the early days.
Red Simon, 2 hours, pushing through guys and keep my truck moving.
Nobody has beaten us in 17 years in the morning. That's what I'm proud of.
Scan the road with the last thing you've been
And WSM produced another country show that scored big ratings nationally, a Saturday night fixture of the 60s, starring Porter Wagner and his spangled suits.
Show. We're glad to have you all join us today. Another day, another dollar.
The people were really scared of television at that time because the theory was, if they see you on television, they won't buy tickets. That was what their thoughts was in the early days.
But reality was quite the opposite. TV not only sold more records for Porter, it made him a household name and a colorful character.
We really looked forward to that because my suits all looked about alike, like in the black and white. And then when we got color, the opening of every show, in living color, the Porter Wagner show. That was a big thing, But it did help our show a lot.
Starring Porter Wagner, Dolly Parton.
I think that they've always tried to program what people in this marketplace want.
And at the lunch hour, 5 days a week, the people wanted noon.
The big homecoming spaghetti supper precedes the NBA Springfield football game. And I thought you would like to know about that.
There's nothing stuffy about noon. The people were the important thing, the people that we had working with us.
People like the late Barbara Moore and a young guy who played piano in Printer's Alley and for $20 a week crooned on noon.
Mostly old standards. I'm in the mood for love, and you must remember this. A kiss is just a kiss. I mean, all those old turkeys. I sang those kinds of things.
You could sing?
I got by. My problem was if I was singing a Sinatra song, I tried to sound like Sinatra. If I was singing a Eddie Fisher, I tried to sound. I never really had my own style. I think that was my problem. But it did all right.
The days of wine and roses.
Teddy Bart was singing The Days of Wine and Roses on November 22nd, 1963. News photographer Bob Manning was about to go to lunch.
And I decided to walk over to the bank of wine machines that we had and read them.
He walked right to the desk. I remember he handed me that news bulletin which said Flash. You don't see that often. Flash, Dallas, President Kennedy shot.
Stayed with it about 5-6 minutes, and the network took it about 1:45 our time. And we went upstairs and watched TV, and that's where we saw that he was dead.
Here now are late, unedited, unscreened films of the shooting scene in Dallas. This is the scene of confusion. Something has happened here. The cameraman running toward the scene for the presidential car ahead. We caught just a blurred glance of the old school depository building from which the sniper fired the shot. This is the reaction from the crowd.
More than any other event, the Kennedy tragedy secured television's role as our premier source for information. TV pulled the nation together. For days, there were no commercials or entertainment programs. On Sunday morning, 2 days after the president's death, accused assassin Lee Harvey Oswald was being transferred from one jail to another. At 11:20, NBC cut live to Dallas, and millions watched as Oswald was shot and killed.
He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot.
It's a little different when you're looking through the viewfinder on a camera. It's somewhat impersonal, but you try for it to be somewhat impersonal so it doesn't run you nuts.
Bob Manning's camera gave Nashvillians a front row seat to history. John F. Kennedy's speech at Vanderbilt just 6 months before his death. The magical Christmas nativity at Centennial Park. The peaceful civil rights demonstrations that took a violent turn. The trial of Jimmy Hoffa nearly turned a courtroom into a sparring ring. And Governor Clement's monumental announcement in 1965 that saved the lives of men on death row.
I have thought about this and I've prayed over it. I'm commuting all of your sentences from death in the electric chair to 99 years in prison.
I used to always look out of the corner of my eye, and I kept seeing this one person's hands, out of the corner of my eye doing this through the bars. When they started doing the loud chanting and praying, that's when I said, boy, this is it. And I just went right to that guy.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
Nearly 25 years later, we can relive that moment through the magic of television. But that magic was constantly improving, and the 60s saw many WSM milestones. In 1963, the station moved from its old location at 15th and Compton to Nob Hill in West Nashville. In 1964, the first weather satellite pictures broadcast anywhere in the country were broadcast on WSM. Channel 4 was first to go to color in 1965, and in about 1967, videotape arrived.
Oh, it's those little candy things with things written on them, like...
I guess that videotape revolutionized the television business more than any other one single item. Because before that, there was no way to immediately record and have ready for immediate playback.
Martin Luther King Jr. was killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee, shot in the face as he stood alone on the balcony of his hotel room.
And the late 60s brought more tragedy and instant replay. Martin Luther King was killed in April of '68. Nearly 2 months to the day later, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. By that time, Al Vax had established himself as a top anchor and reporter at Channel 4.
I got to cover both the Democratic and Republican conventions in 1968. The Republican convention was green. It was a vacation in Miami Beach. The Democratic convention in Chicago was something else. Something that this country should be totally ashamed. Oh, I was kicked back. I really was.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Rocket Tranquility, we copy you on the ground.
But this is how we all remember saying goodbye to the 60s when we said hello to the moon.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Ironically, it was in that same year that Channel 4 hired its biggest star. He was doing the weather in Columbia, South Carolina, and joined Channel 4 as a sort of utility player.
I don't know why management asked me, but they said, what are your ideas on your replacement? And I said, there's a new guy who's just come in from South Carolina, and he does booth work. He's the guy who says, this was Channel 4 National. I think he does weekend weather. I think the guy's great. You got to put him on. A guy named Dan Miller.
With the same sort of southern charm and easy manner, Dan Miller would continue what Judd Collins began nearly 20 years earlier.
I didn't perceive myself as an heir apparent. I worked with Judd. I anchored the news with Judd, and I admired Judd a great deal. He was Mr. Television when I came to Nashville. And no, I in no way perceived that I would be an heir apparent as the primary newscaster there. I didn't think I would last over 6 months.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
Okay.
The earliest women on the air in Nashville were relegated to weather and kiddie shows. Here's Elizabeth Owen, who told me, "I'm not sure if I was the first, but way back in 1972, I was hired with no knowledge of weather to be a weather girl on WSIX, Channel 8. Jim Travis was the anchor, by the way. She says the job ended just 3 months later." And here's Miss Nancy, whose real name was Beverly Early. Her daughter wrote me saying that her mom hosted Romper Room from 1964 to 73 and became quite well known. The daughter's favorite perk was tagging along with Mom to the Nashville Christmas Parade. By the way, Beverly still lives in town at Morning Point in Brentwood, where she's still quite a celebrity. On the news side, of course, Ruth Ann Leach was a true trailblazer who was forced to wear a wig on the air so as not to appear too sexy, I guess.
If you have ever seen Mad Men, then you have some idea what it might have been like around here. Mary Tyler Moore passed recently, and her sitcom was a newsroom, and there was the happy homemaker, Sue Ann Nivens. They called me Sue Ann in the newsroom because my consumer feature, Dollars and Cents, reminded them of the happy homemaker. So I was Sue Ann as much as I was Ruth Ann in those days.
Wow. And you got to wear a wig as mandated by the general manager.
They got to say how we looked, and I had very long counterculture hair, shall we say, in those days. The Nashville Banner actually did a story on it. If you're in the library, you can see in the archives a picture of me with the very long hair. I used to go do a speech that involved me showing up looking like I looked in casual real life and then changing into the television person right before their eyes.
That was effective.
It was, and when it got put in the newspaper, then I got to wear my real hair.
Friday's flooding has left some Nashville residents with even more trouble than they might have expected.
Speaking of hair, Lonnie Lardner, who came before me at Channel 4, was also given a hair conversation.
So we sit down to take billboard pictures, and this is after I'm hired, the contract is signed, and Kettering comes down to the billboard session, and he says, the hair has to go. And I had the big mane, sort of like what I have now, and I just burst out into tears. I mean, it was my identity at 22. I must say, I think Mike was right, because his theory was that it was a distraction. And it probably was.
Yeah, but here it is still long, and you still got it.
Well, I don't work for him anymore.
We all know that Oprah was plucked out of a local radio station to join Channel 5. And I'm betting they still are considered one of the luckiest stations in the world to help launch that career.
Getting a job on television was beyond my wildest dreams.
On Channel 4, Elaine Gannett co-hosted the Noon Show with Teddy Bart. But I'll bet you didn't know she was the first female DJ in town. After graduating from Vanderbilt in 1973, she told me she auditioned for the co-host position and was hired just 2 weeks out of college.
The first 2 years that I was on that program, every time Teddy took a vacation, they did not allow me to host the show by myself. I had to have a male co-host.
The woman's role in the show needed to be upgraded. Not only because of the feminist movement, but just it needed to be. Like co-anchors in news today, where there is parity. Same thing on a show like that.
Her first day, though, turned out to be a Jewish holiday, and Teddy Bart was off. So the substitute host, who went on the air with Elaine, had Sajak. A little about the Noon Show. She says it was unique in local TV. There was a live band of 8 musicians and a studio audience of about 40 to 50 people. Viewers had to make reservations to be in that audience. And even on snow days,
She said folks showed up. Elaine went on to become the first full-time entertainment reporter in town and a correspondent on a new show called Entertainment Tonight.
From Channel 4 News, this is The Scene at 6.
Good evening, I'm Carol Marie.
When it came to hard news, though, no one in my book could compare to my longtime friend and mentor, Carol Marie. She went toe-to-toe, live with then-Governor Ray Blanton, and probably did more to undo his career than all of his misdeeds combined.
In the 70s, that women reporters should be talking to the wives of politicians. When I carved out a prison beat, which I started carving out when I was in Knoxville, I did so that nobody would have any doubt that I was a serious person.
It was January 8th, 1977, less than a year after Clayton Dawson had had his sentence commuted.
Boy, did it work. Carol uncovered literally hundreds of stories questioning the state prison system and the Board of Pardons and Paroles. In the end, all the reports, all the investigation, boiled down to 16 and a half minutes live on The Scene at 6.
Thank you for coming, though.
It's a pleasure.
First and foremost, the case of Roger Humphreys.
When we did the Roger Humphreys story, this young man who you probably know who was a convicted double murderer who ended up being a state photographer with press credentials and with credit cards, etc. When we did that story, suddenly we got a call from Blanton's people saying the governor is willing to be interviewed on this. And we were rather stunned, and it was a live interview.
So let's don't confuse the facts. Just stick with the facts and we'll be all right.
We sat bleachers, newspaper reporters were there, department heads were there, state troopers were there. And it was clear that Blanton's people felt that there was going to be something happen here and that Blanton was going to take care of Carol Marie.
And I remember the last piece of advice I gave to Carol before she went on the air. I said, Carol, I know you well. I said, now you're going to be fair, that's a given. You're going to be tough. That's a given. Be a reporter. This is not a debate. You ask questions.
No, but what I'm asking you is, looking at his file and looking at the way...
You're not asking, you're telling. Now, ask me a question, I'll respond to it.
As I said, Governor.
I said, ask and I'll respond. It's just that simple. She asked the tough questions. She was impeccably fair. She was a consummate reporter. Ray Blanton got so flustered that he lost control of himself. Let me explain it to you simple enough where you can understand.
The wasn't this a political patronage kind of hiring? Wasn't this a special kind of justice?
Now, do you understand that?
In politics?
No. You asked me why. I've just given you 4 reasons why. You want 10 more?
Thank you very much for being with us, Governor Blanton.
When the interview was over, I wasn't really sure what had happened.
Yeah, it took a day, and it took reflections on it in the newspaper for it to really hit us exactly what had happened. But the confrontation was not to sound trite, but it was good television. It was, and that, but we were all women. Our hearts were pounding, and it's hard to describe what we felt, but we didn't know at that moment exactly what had happened.
In an historic move, the first of its kind in Tennessee, Governor Ray Blanton has been removed from office by the early swearing in of Governor-elect Lamar Alexander.
I'm saddened and hurt for the state of Tennessee.
The irony is, or as negatively as I believe the governor felt about me as a reporter, I think that he unwittingly did more for my career than probably any individual did before or has since.
Here are a few more faces from the past.
I know that there's going to be things in the movie that I'm not going to like. But there's a lot of things about myself I don't like. And maybe by sitting back and watching her go ahead with them might make me polish up on the things that I don't like. And I think it probably, that probably is what I get out of the movie more than anything else.
Sissy, what will you get out of this movie more than anything else?
Oh, it's one of the most positive characters I've ever played. The main thing I've gotten out of it is getting to know Loretta. And I don't really feel sad that it's ending today because,
know, most roles you do, most characters, you have to kind of let go of that character the last day of shooting. But this one, I can always come back to Hurricane Mills and fall right back into it.
I can go to her house and just be one again.
Before she became bigger than life, Robin Roberts was a sports reporter at Channel 4. I worked with her, and some of my friends will probably kill me for showing these shots of their younger selves. You ready? Okay. I can't escape that treatment. Check out the big hair, the dark black hair, and variations of what became known as the Demetria do. When I arrived in 1984, people noticed my short hair, but also my name. I've met literally dozens of young ladies who were named after me through the years, and that may be the greatest honor of all.
There's a feeling in the air that you can't get anywhere except in Nashville. I've tasted 1,000 yesterdays and I love the magic ways of Nashville. Working side by side, we share the growing pride each time we touch the sky. From where the river flows to where the sunset goes, we're all the neighbors makes no difference where I go. You're the best hometown I know. Hello, Nashville. Hello,
And remember when TV used to sign off the air for the night? This may bring back some memories.
This concludes another day of total color telecast service to Nashville and the Mid-South from WTVF, Nashville, Tennessee. Operating with maximum power of 100,000 watts on Channel 5 by authority of the Federal Communications Commission. Always mindful of our public trust and responsibility, it is the policy of WTVF to provide the very best in wholesome family entertainment and the latest coverage of local, national, and worldwide news. WTVF is an affiliate of the CBS television network. We return to the air tomorrow morning at 5:15 a.m. Central Daylight Time. And now, our national anthem.
I know we could watch all day, right? I highly recommend this little book that you can get like at Walgreens. It's all about Nashville broadcasting. Lee Dorman did it, and a few things that Lee has in here that are really interesting. I talked about the Kitchen College and Phyla, the cook. Jean Hughes was actually the first weather girl, and that was 1955. So I'm going to have to disappoint Elizabeth Owens and tell her, no, you were like 15 years later. That was on WLAC. Channel 5 had a lot of firsts. Another woman named Eudora Boxley was the first black woman with her own show. That was in the mid-1950s. She had a show called Southern Cooking with Eudora Boxley, also on Channel 5. Not very much about women in this book because not much was happening with women. Carol Marie was the first at Channel 4 in 1976. Of course, Ann Holt was shortly after that, I believe in 1977 or 78. I started in 84. Most of the women on the network level, they talk about the class of 72. I'm happy to say that Leslie Stahl is still on 60 Minutes, and she was a member of the class of 72. Others that started that year or thereabouts, Jane Pauley. I remember I was in high school when she came on the air in Chicago and then quickly went to the Today Show. Connie Chung, there was a whole group of women that started in the 70s. Now if you turn on the TV, it's almost all women. It's hard to find men now. One of the reasons, at least this is my theory, is that women are anxious to start careers. They will work for cheap. They will take the worst shifts, and they'll hang in there. Where guys usually say, I'm out of here unless I get a raise, boss. And that's why you have so many women, especially young women, working in television news. The sad truth is that they are paying reporters now less than what I was making in 1984 at a couple of regional. I know a lot of people that are starting journalism careers having to drive Uber and, deliver pizzas and everything else just to grab a piece of that dream. So the times they are changing, but not in a good way for television journalism.
What happened to Carol Martin?
Carol is still up in Chicago. She did a stint. She did some work with 60 Minutes. Things just follow Carol. She was in New York City, a block from the Twin Towers, covered in dust, went on the air live with Dan Rather. She happened to be up there covering a story and had to duck under a cul-de-sac or whatever to get out of that. But she and a guy named Don Mosley, who worked for years at Channel 4, started a journalism ethics program at DePaul University. So she's mostly teaching now, but also producing stuff, and she has never quit. She's as spunky and unchanged. Now that is a woman who is drinking from the fountain of youth. Honestly, she looks great, and I'm getting ready to do what I hope will be a whole podcast about the Blanton interview, the 16 and a half minutes that changed Tennessee. Yeah. John Bridges, thank you for coming out.
Well, thank you, Demetria. Did you see a legend talking about legends?
Well, I don't know about that. There's so many great stories and so many great women. I mean, there was a time, and apologies for the old film, it gets out of sync, and sometimes the audio is all over the place, but y'all get the idea, I hope. Right.
Late 70s, I think there was a woman anchored with a guy named Bill on Channel 2. Luann somebody. Does that ring a bell at all?
Bill Jenkins, but I'll remember the woman.
That combination did not last very long.
Well, you remember Fred Graham and Ann? That didn't last very long either. That was a very short-lived experiment. Irving Law was a genius when it came to creating a cast of characters. And I think that's why, at least in the early golden years of Channel 4, the teams endured. You didn't see a lot of, this one was here and then that one was gone. You saw people that stayed at the station and stayed together and worked together for a long time because he really believed in chemistry and believed that the two people sitting there relating to each other had to really like each other. And, that doesn't happen when you just kind of pluck this one and sit that one next to him. And after Dan passed away, they didn't listen to the wisdom of their elders. At least where I was concerned, I was, put down with several other co-anchors. First I said, please don't put anyone next to me for a while. It will offend the audience, it'll be like stepping out on your spouse or something and not really, honoring his memory. So for a while they let me be out there by myself. But it was funny when Lane Gannick said when Teddy was on vacation, they brought in a guy because it had to be a guy there. This is interesting. When Dan left for California initially, and I was left there, they told me, we can't have a woman do the 10 o'clock news. So you can work at 6, but we're going to bring Teddy in to do the 7 o'clock. And I thought, why? We can't stay up late? We're up after dark? But it was very, very interesting. And later Mike Kettering admitted to me that was a stupid decision, that I was perfectly capable of doing the 10 o'clock news. Because it wasn't long after that we had another co-anchor who I'm not going to name publicly, but wasn't doing awfully well, both in terms of public perception and performance. And Mike was like, will you please come on the 10 o'clock news? And I was like, I don't understand that late, Mike. But we worked it out in the end. Another interesting thing, and I recently told a group of young women this, when I arrived at the station, this is just how times have changed. When I arrived at the station in '84, I noticed that there was a parking place that said Dan Miller. There was a parking place that said Bill Hall, Charlie McAlexander. And in those parking places were these like shiny new cars from Beeman or whatever. And I said, whoa, that's kind of cool. Where's my car? I never got one. Or a parking place. So they're just, you know, some things never change. It was an interesting time. I was more, don't get me wrong, I was more than thrilled to have the job. But I was noticing inequity from the minute I got here. And at age 24, I was absolutely thrilled to have this big job in an important market at a legendary station. But things were not fair and things were not equal.
Where did you teach? When did they start getting women on, like engineers or
We always had women, question from Caroline was when were women on the cruise? We always had a female photojournalist in the field, believe it or not. From the earliest days of me being there, a woman named Ruth Smith, African-American woman, and her sister Nancy Smith was a producer in the newsroom. But Ruth carried that camera on her shoulder. Then we had Zena Bauman was a longtime photojournalist, Sherry Thompson, a woman named Lorraine Grula. There was always at least one very brave female out there, you know, hauling these very, very heavy cameras. We had a woman on studio camera, I remember her. Female directors and engineers and audio personnel, girls weren't they weren't getting the education. They weren't training for those kind of jobs. Now there are lots of them, but at the time there really wasn't. A lot of women in sales, though.
As a one of the few native Nashvilleians, it seems like around, and certainly watching all the ABC, NBC, and CBS broadcasts through the years, and especially in the 80s, 90s. One of the things I was noticing, I talked to Kim about this, was that Channel 4, and especially with your crew, with Dan and Bill Hall and Rudy Kalis and all, and then Channel 5, Chris Hart, seemed to be this steadiness, the long time for whatever was going on within the local station and I guess the parent company. And the Channel 2 had been more of the learning curve. You never knew what new name reporter was going to be out there. But it was nice, again, growing up and seeing the steadiness, and it was always sort of fun as we popped between the channels to see which stories y'all were highlighting and which general order. And that was just sort of a fun, new, nerdy, new, junky thing to see how the order was done, because obviously each station usually covered the major one, but usually in different orders.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Local ownership. It was all about local ownership then, and I think that's why people stayed for a long time. Channel 2 probably had the most volatile ownership. If you can recall, they changed their call letters several times too. They were owned by GE for a while. They were owned by Knight Ridder. I think that's why they're KRN to this day, Knight Ridder Nashville. And of course, here's a little quiz. We all know what WSM stands for, right? We Shield Millions. And LAC, Life and Casualty. TVF, I'm not sure. I mean, they had to change it. And of course, WSM, when TV5, was that? I don't know. But I love the fact that it means something. But the station, local ownership was everything. And when George Gillette bought the station from National Life in, I guess, right before I came, 83, and they had to add the V to WSMV. I'll never forget, I came initially and anchored the weekends with Teddy. And I did that for about 4 months and then got the big job. So I was very excited. But, so on Saturdays, there was this guy like in these wacky Madras plaid shorts walking around, and I'm thinking, whose dad is that? You know? And is someone going to say, hey, who are you, buddy? and it turned out to be the owner, George Gillette. He was there on a Saturday. His office was in the building. He was that concerned about the station and wanting to make sure that the product was good that he would come in on his off time. And I mean, it really was an extraordinary place. That's why my initial plan of staying for 3 years turned into almost 34, because we were doing things no other local television station was doing. We had an hour-long newscast, which was unheard of, which allowed that second half hour to be presenting longer-form stories. We were putting documentaries on the air. If you had a really good story and you could convince Mike Kettering that the audience was into it, he'd let you go to Europe, you know, with a crew and shoot it. And it better be good, and it better, you know, better live up to your hype. But it was an extraordinary place to work during that real special time.
You just mentioned something that reminded me of Ted Turner.
Yes.
You know, they're doing a little bit of the, you know, he lived there and wandered around and whatnot, and I just thought, wow.
All of those obits on Ted Turner, I was thinking Mike Kettering. I mean, thank God Mike's still with us, but that sort of dedication and that sort of vision for what television could be, specifically local television, you know, we started dedicating, I don't know if y'all remember, but entire years to social issues, you know, parenting, the family, hunger, poverty, and doing in-depth reporting on these sorts of things, which was, you know, no other station in the country was doing that sort of thing. And it wasn't just us. I mean, competition breeds better work across the board. And we had, you know, vicious but still friendly competition with 5 and 2. And this is before Channel 17 had, I think, like a 15-minute thing at night that was really not a full-fledged newscast until later. But, you know, we love to beat one another to a good story, but I can say that if you were out in the field and something important was happening and your battery died, your friend from 2 or 5 would hand you a battery and make sure that you got what you needed. It wasn't that mean out there.
Was Valerie Hyman an innocent shame?
Yes.
Was really made child sexual abuse. I mean, I was working in that, and where we saw increase in reporting after that, 300%.
Absolutely, that was a landmark. They won a DuPont, Columbia, and a Peabody, which are the 2, you know, premier awards. I believe in it was 85. Yeah. Valerie Hyman really brought child sexual abuse into the public conversation.
They did a survey of Nashville people. They called people on the phone and had women who admitted to them that they had been sexually abused. So it's the first time that people have been asked about it.
Yeah, and I can remember Valerie you know, basically with the germ of what became, you know, important research on child sexual abuse leading to lives in prostitution and other, you know, horrible outcomes for adult women. So it was really important. And I mean, on local TV at the dinner hour. But it was important enough. I'll tell Valerie you mentioned that. We still talk. Yeah, really.
I used to work at J.C. Bradford, and I was surprised to see Ronnie Scott in that one segment about he and his dance partner. Can you tell me anything more about that, about Ronnie and that's
No, I think he's passed, hasn't he?
Yeah, he was the head of municipal securities, and just a fun-loving guy, and he was laughing and carrying on. Yeah, he's been dead for probably 15.
I know that was a sad thing. There were so many people who passed on in that 40-year piece, which was done in 1990, so it's old. But that was a blast because we put out a solicitation on the air saying, you know, if you've got old pictures or old film or stories about Channel 4, we're about to have this big anniversary, you know, call me and send me this stuff. And we had that, I believe it was like one reel of the 5 o'clock hop left. And I thought, certainly some of these people got to still be around. And not only did we find him, we found his dance partner. And then we brought it to their house and had him watch it live. I mean, it was, the reactions were priceless.
Yeah, that was great.
What about Dr. Schwartz? She is on TV, or was that?
I I think Dinah was already in the big time by 1950. She was probably too big for, I don't know, you guys can correct me, she may have been on, you know, one of the radio shows, this Sunday Down South, or, you know, those sorts of things. I defer to the other real historians. I'm just pretty good on Channel 4 history, and I know a little bit about some of the others.
Are you mentoring any other younger in your business now?
Every time someone calls me, I'm always willing to talk to them and to look at their, you know, the work that they're doing, but it's really so different. If you notice,
what do you say to them now?
You know, I hate to say it, but I kind of ask what they want out of it, because social media and the way news is put together and the length of time. I mean, an extraordinarily long report. I was on Channel 5 last night with a 5-minute story. That is unheard of. And the only reason I told them at the Banner that I'd be on television still with Channel 5 is if I could do something longer than a minute. Because honestly, you can't get a feel for a topic, you can't get a feel for a person in a minute, and that's what's being fed out there. It's funny because even some of these Instagrams and stuff, if your video goes over 2 minutes, it rejects it. You can't put it on their platform.
Nice.
So I guess I'm just spoiled from those years of long form reporting. I like to let a story breathe and to get a sense for someone and sort of set the scene. And I think television can be art. It absolutely can. I've seen it. I've done it, hopefully, a few times in my life. And I'm hoping that, you know, young people, I spent 1 year at Lipscomb as like the professional in residence. And the one thing that made me happier than anything is we had a group of young women, and all of them could probably be, you know, beauty queens if that was what the prerequisite was for being on the air. But the one who impressed me most said, "I want to make documentary films." And she's at NYU Film School. Finished it at Lipscomb, and we, as a small group, did a short documentary about, of all things, the guitar-shaped scoreboard at the Sound Stadium. And we won a National Edward R. Murrow Student Award and presented that at the Baseball Hall of Fame. So, and I remember telling the students, we got to come up, we knew there was a baseball symposium, so we had to come up with some sort of uniquely Nashville angle and what would be a really interesting story. And they all looked at me like I was crazy when I said, have you ever noticed the scoreboard is shaped like a guitar? You know, I wonder what the story is behind that. And they looked at me like, are you nuts? And then we found all these really interesting things, you know, talking to Larry Schmittou and talking to all the great players that came out of Greer Stadium and the Sounds, and it really was a highlight. So Lipscomb was very happy.
Didn't we see that documentary at the Nashville History Club when you started?
I think I did show it. Yeah. Oh, and a little plug. Can I plug something? My swan song with the Lipscomb, after we did that, they said, ooh, let's do another one and win another award. And I'm like, got too much pressure, okay? But we did produce an hour-long piece on General Robert Nealon, and it's screening at NECAT on the 27th of this month over at the NECAT studios off Whitebridge Road. And it's the story. It's a lot that you don't know about a man whose name is on the UT Stadium, and most people don't know much beyond that. But wait till you hear this guy's story. A Lipscomb professor wrote the book, and it's kind of based on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my plug.
We want to thank Demetria so much for doing this.
Thank you.